Welcome to the 6th edition of the NAIA Weekly Football Report. I'm your host, Alan Grossbach, alongside Chad Waller, coming to you from the NAIA headquarters in downtown Kansas City, Missouri.
And Alan, there's 4 regular season weekends left, and I'm really excited to see what those teams that are leading the conferences and those teams that could leapfrog those conference winners right now, because now is the time to make that move.
Agreed. With only 4 weeks to go, there's a lot, like you say, a lot of moving and shaking that can happen, and there's those teams that are in the receiving votes or in the 21 to 25 range that are looking to jump up in the top 20 and claim one of those, coveted top 20 spots so they can claim an automatic berth into the playoffs. As we do each week, we'll take a look back at last weekend's games, go behind the scenes of the top 25, looking at some key games for the upcoming week, highlight some milestones, and showcase any feature stories from around the NAIA. We'll kick off today's show again, looking at some key games from this past weekend.
And I'm going to start with the NAIA game of the week, Alan, in Wichita, Kansas, a KCAC battle between number 13 Tabor and number 15 Friends. And Tabor squeaked out a road win 20-19 Saturday in Wichita. With both teams ranked in the top 15 in the NAIA in total defense, scoring was at a premium. And a defensive effort late in the game proved pivotal as an interception by Frank Galvez in the fourth quarter sealed Tabor's win. Tabor held Friends to 102 rushing yards, which was more than 100 yards below their season average. Now, offensively, Tabor was able to generate a big day in yardage, but was not able to find the end zone often, and part of that reason was 3 fumbles, one of which was lost. 3 actually were lost. Offensively for Tabor, the bright spot was running back James Monroe Jr., who became the all-time career rushing holder. He needed just 5 yards entering the game to break the previous mark of 3,008 yards, so congrats to him. He finished the afternoon with 197 yards on 34 carries and 1 score, so a dominant day by him. The loss for Friends puts 4 teams in a deadlock at number 1 in the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference standings, all with 4-1 record, and that's Tabor, Friends, Ottawa, and Sterling. So with 4 regular season games remaining on the schedule in the KCAC, really of those 4, Sterling controls its own destiny as they have no more games against the other 3 teams at the top of the standings.
Right, a lot to shake out there in the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference. It'll be fun to watch that league kind of play out through the last 4 weeks. And we touched on it a little bit, but the reason why there are 4 teams tied at number 1 is because Sterling upset number 8 Ottawa 30-18 last weekend. And this was Sterling's homecoming game, so a lot of emotion in this contest, I'm sure. This is the second time Sterling has defeated the 8th ranked team this year when they upset number 8 Tabor back on September 28th. So there's another key win within the conference for the Warriors. Sterling held down an Ottawa offense that entered the game, averaging more than 38 points per game to, like we said, only 18. And that their offense was 8th in the nation. The scoring total for Ottawa was the fewest since August of 2011 when they scored only 16 in a loss to Baker. Ottawa's offensive line struggled throughout the day, giving up 8 team sacks, and then the offense only converted 2 of 14 third downs, so not an equation for success there. Quarterback Reggie Lanford for the Warriors led the Warrior offense with 189 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, including a 52-yarder in the second quarter. He also added 84 passing yards on the afternoon. And kind of like we touched on, winning its final 4 games, Sterling controls their own destiny, and they would get that automatic spot, assuming they jump within the top 20, get that automatic spot for the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference.
Yep. So a lot of big games, especially in the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference coming up. Now I'm going to turn to number 2 Cumberland's. They stayed undefeated at 6-0 with a 38-35 win over rival number 11 Georgetown. The Patriots defense recorded 6 sacks and they forced 3 fumbles, so they got after it on the day. That countered where the defense allowed 341 passing yards, but just 48 on the ground. Quarterback Adam Craig shouldered the offense with 145 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and also accounted for 95 passing yards and 1 passing score. The Cumberland's rushing offense, which has been ranked all season long at number 1, went against a defense ranked number 7 and came away with 309 rushing yards. So quite a big day for the Cumberland's rushing attack. Through 6 games, 3 individual rushers have gone over 350 rushing yards already. So I believe the top rusher for Cumberland is just over 500 yards. And as a team, they've now hit at least 200-plus rushing yards in 17 straight games. The Patriots are now 4-0 in the Mid-South Conference East Division, which is 1.5 game lead over second-place Kentucky Christian.
It just kind of makes you wonder if anyone can stop that potent Cumberland's offense. I mean, Coach Bland has that running attack kind of firing on all cylinders with Terrence Cobb. He's playing well, and And, of course, Craig, like you mentioned, so that dual-threat quarterback, and just everything's going right for them right now.
Yeah, it's exciting to see how they'll finish out the last part of the year with if they can continue that ground attack.
Right. And moving into the Mid-States Football Association, another team that I feel like we talk about every week, and deservingly so, is number 3 Grandview. And this past week, they knocked off number 23 Trinity International 47-14, so another dominant performance out of the Vikings. Sophomore quarterback Derek Fulton led the offense with 269 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. He also ran for 80 yards on the afternoon, bringing his total of 349 for the game. Not to take anything away from the defense, because they were equally as dominant against the Trojans, holding Trinity International to only 143 yards of total offense and only 10 first downs. Trinity International only had 4 drives with 5 plays or more, and they scored both their touchdowns off Grandview turnovers, so they took advantage of a couple Viking mistakes, but otherwise didn't have anything going for them.
Yeah, now with Grandview, another one against top 25, their 4th of the season, they continue to roll, and like you said, their defense has been a mainstay all season long.
Right.
Now I'm going to turn our attention to the Battle of the St. Francis's, as you coined it last week. Number 4 St. Francis out of Indiana defeated number 20 St. Francis of Illinois 37-28. Backup quarterback David Yoder had another big game, and it's nice to see as he's coming off the bench the last couple weeks. He connected on 31 of 51 passes for over 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tailback Jason Nicodemus also had a big performance, rushing for 128 yards on 24 carries, and he was a workhorse in the second half with 112 rushing yards in the last 30 minutes. The Cougars finished 2 plays short of tying the NAIA record for plays in a game with 108. The win improved St. Francis of Indiana to 5-1 on the year, with all 5 wins coming against ranked opponents. So another steady team that's been able to show up each and every week against those top 25 teams.
You're right, and even mixing in and out players, and it's been pretty impressive to see them keep that streak alive while having to shuffle some of their key individuals like they've had. And moving back to kind of the upsets, in addition to what we talked about with Sterling, there were also 2 others that occurred last weekend, and one was Northwestern Iowa defeating number 14 Concordia, Nebraska 30-28. The Bulldogs entered the game undefeated at 6-0, so this is their first loss in the season. The Red Raiders trailed 22-16 early in the 4th quarter, but scored a pair of touchdowns in the final frame, including a career-long 69-yard run by Jesse Riley to take a 30-22 advantage. Concordia did respond on their next possession with a 6-play, 57-yard drive to make it a 2-point game, but the 2-point conversion was unsuccessful, and Northwestern was able to hold on throughout the final 2 minutes of the contest. The Red Raiders totaled 400 yards of total offense against one of the NAIA's top-ranked defenses, led by a rushing attack that went for 228 yards. Riley paced the team with nearly 120 yards rushing on 12 carries, including that touchdown we mentioned.
And it's good to see, a 3rd team, I'd say, in the GPAC, Northwestern, kind of come up to the top of that league. You had Concordia; they were previously undefeated. I'm looking to circle that. I think it's the November 2nd weekend with Concordia and Morningside showing up. So mark your calendars for that. Another upset occurred out west in the Frontier Conference as Southern Oregon defeated number 18 Montana State Northern 55-28. The victory is a 4th straight for a surging Southern Oregon team that started the year with 3 consecutive losses. Quarterback Austin Dodge, who's been a guy we've mentioned quite a few times this year, he earned National Player of the Week, and deservedly so, as he threw for 469 yards and 5 touchdowns and spread the ball around to 8 different receivers. Wow. This was his 5th straight game with at least 5 touchdowns. That's 25 in my simple math brain. That could be a season for some quarterbacks.
You're right. He's been absolutely impressive the entire year, just like he was last year as just a sophomore. So he's a junior this year, so we get one more year of him potentially for NAIA football, which is exciting. And looking at the team of Southern Oregon, you can almost count them out a little bit after those first 3 losses, but they're really playing well of late.
It's almost like video game numbers, isn't it?
You're right. They're almost video game numbers. Jumping into this week's top 25, starting off with teams ranked 16-25, we had 4 newcomers join the group and the poll this week, and number 21 Sterling, number 22 Southern Oregon, number 23 Northwestern, and number 25 Bacone. So it's good to see those 3 teams that picked up big upsets getting the national recognition they deserve. For Sterling, the mention snaps a streak of 42 straight polls without being ranked, and the last time they were ranked came in September of 2010. The Warriors are 5-2 on the year, and like we mentioned, have top 25 wins against Tabor and Ottawa, so kudos to them. Bacone, who was last ranked last season, is the first Central States Football League team to garner a mention in the top 25 since Langston dropped out in the first regular season edition. So good to see the CSFL getting a team that's kind of jumping in the rankings and making some noise. And as we mentioned, Southern Oregon and Northwestern, they're ranked earlier this year. Another team within this group I want to touch on is first-year program Reinhardt, who highlighted the poll with a poll-high 5-place jump to number 19 this week. The Eagles are 5-2, and they received their first ever ranking last week, so definitely a team that's come on strong. You know, they opened the year with 2 losses, similar to how Southern Oregon dropped 3 in a row. Now they've won 5 straight, a team that's just playing really well.
Yeah, you're right, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but they have a tough test this weekend against another top 25 team. Now, turning to the group of ranked teams within the 15 through 16 group, every team within this group moved places except for number 6 Missouri Valley and number 7 Carroll, as both of those teams held their spot for the 3rd straight week, so they've been consistent in that position. Both of those teams have 1 loss on the season and are tied atop their respective conference standings, as Carroll is tied with Rocky Mountain at 5-1, and Missouri Valley in the Tough Heart of America Athletic Conference is tied with Benedictine at 5-0. Missouri Valley has a big game come up this weekend when they host number 8 Baker, who is 6-1 overall. Meanwhile, Carroll travels to Montana State Northern at 4-3, who is receiving votes. But the Lights have lost 2 straight, so we'll see if the Lights can get back over the hump.
Yeah, 2 important games for those teams. And, you know, for the 2nd straight week, the top 5 remains intact, 1 through 5, no shuffling and anything. And part of that's because all 5 squads won last weekend. And Morningside was the unanimous selection for the 6th time this season. This is their 7th overall time at number 1. And they are a top 10 team in 16 statistical categories, including owning the NAIA's best scoring offense at averaging 53.5 points per game. This is coming after a 62-27 win at Dakota Wesleyan. And that was a Dakota Wesleyan squad who was receiving votes in the top 25 at the time, had come off a big win against a ranked team, and were really looking to jump in. And the Mustangs pretty much just dominated them in that contest.
And I was waiting to see if Morningside could do that against an average to a above average team, and they showed that by scoring the points they did against Dakota Wesleyan.
Absolutely. And kind of diving a little deeper into the top 12 as a group, if you look at all these squads, none of them have more than 1 loss. And dissecting even further, Morningside, Cumberland's, St. Francis, and Tabor don't face anyone within the top 12 for the rest of the year. So 4 weeks without facing a top 12 team. While Baker and Missouri Valley, you could argue, have one of the toughest schedules to close the year. As we mentioned, they host each other they play each other this weekend, and then Baker has to close the season at number 12 Peru State. That's on November 16th. And Missouri Valley has a game that I'm really looking forward to on November 9th against number 5 Benedictine. And, you know, there's other teams within the group that have 1 game within the top 12, so a lot can happen within that top 12 group, and that's really the sweet spot for automatics and at-large berths for our football championship series.
Yeah, good point. And we had a lot of discussion in the early part of our broadcast about the KCAC, and now it's going to come down to the Heart of America with 4 ranked teams in these last 4 regular season weekends.
It'll be fun to watch.
Yes, it will. And now we've got 4 undefeated teams left that I'm going to talk about. Starting with Grandview at 7-0, Benedictine at 7-0, Morningside at 6-0, and Cumberland's at 6-0. Concordia out of Nebraska, they were undefeated going into this past weekend at 6-0, but fell to Northwestern 30-28, which is what you talked about earlier. Cumberland's and Grandview, they both play ranked opponents this weekend in Reinhardt and St. Ambrose. Last season, Morningside was the only team to finish the regular season unbeaten, so there's a potential chance to have 4 regular season undefeated teams.
It'll be interesting to see if they can carry that momentum throughout, finish the year unbeaten, because I think, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it'll be the most unbeaten teams we've had finish the regular season that way since I think 2010. I could be wrong, but I know it's at least been a couple years, because last year, like you mentioned, we had 1. I believe the year before we had 3. So it'll be fun to watch those teams close out their conference seasons and make their way into the playoffs. And, you know, kind of transitioning into some key games this weekend, a few of them you've touched on a little bit. We've got 3 games that have ranked teams playing each other. And one that you mentioned is number 2 Cumberland's at number 19 Reinhardt. Now, this is a Mid-South Conference crossover game, so it doesn't directly impact where they fall within each division, respectively, but it does potentially impact the rankings and whether they're within the top 20 or how that plays out. You know, moving farther west, number 8 St. Ambrose, visits number 3 Grandview. Now, these are the last 2 unbeaten teams in the Mid-States Football Association Midwest League, so a key game for both squads. The winner of that game holds at least a 1-game advantage on the rest of the division. That should be a lot of fun to watch. And lastly, out of the Heart of America Athletic Conference, number 9 Baker goes to number 6 Missouri Valley in a, like we mentioned earlier, a very important Heart of America Athletic Conference game as they look to power through the remainder of their schedule.
Yeah, those 3 games are really some key games this weekend. And if I were to circle one that I really want to watch, it's the Reinhardt-Cumberland's game, because Reinhardt in their first year, they've had some good key wins early on, and they've won 5 straight, I think it was what we mentioned. But this is a true test to see if they match up with a really tough and undefeated Cumberland's team.
Yeah, it'll be a tough day for Reinhardt facing one of the most powerful offenses in the NAIA, but should be fun to watch. The other games will be really entertaining as well. That's the beauty of these last few weeks, is everything matters. Well, that puts a wrap on this edition of the NAIA Weekly Football Report, brought to you by Play NAIA, the NAIA's Eligibility Center. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with more exciting news around NAIA football. Thanks for watching, and until next time, good night.